Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the season premiere of the Shannara Chronicles Druid. And I really like this episode. It did a good job of setting up the fallout for last season and kind of where we are now in this season. So, we start off with actually where we left off last season with Eritrea being captured supposedly by trolls. But we see the one person take off their mask, and she's like, "It's you." And it's this person, Cogline, who had evidently made a promise to her mother 20 years ago to protect her. And she's like, "Well, I can't stay here. My friends are going to be looking for me." He's like, "Well, you can just stay here with us. If they come looking for you, there'll at least be a place for them to kind of look for you and find you." So, of course, then we go 1 year later, and we see Eritrea scavenging in, like, the ruins of, like, a ship. And, of course, at first she's alone, and then we see this other woman pop up. She's like, "Ugh, you don't want to risk yourself. Cogline will be freaked out if something happens to you." She's like, "Don't worry, Lyria." So, of course, we see that there's a relationship going on between Eritrea and Lyria. So, of course, they kind of get what they're going for. They kind of come down, and, of course, they've got some stuff. She tosses a thing over, "Take this to Cogline." So evidently he's a tinkerer with that kind of stuff. And the real trolls start showing up, and they're like, "Holy shit." So everybody kind of like runs off. She like tells them to run off, and she's like running off on foot through the woods. And of course we get the trolls going in, and she does this really cool move where she like runs off this log and frickin' just takes down, jumping onto this one troll and takes him out. Like, holy shit. Then this other one is charging at her with a crossbow, and she just freaking does a nice throw of a knife right into its face, kills it before it can get off the shot. It's like, damn, this did a good job of showing off how badass Eritrea is. So, of course, the two trolls are still coming after her, and she has this, like, bomb grenade thing that she throws at them and knocks them both out, and she starts running on, like, the Golden Gate Bridge. So, she's, like, going through cars and everything. We see one of the trolls going at her, and she's like on top of this car and pretty much tricks it to getting on the car and falling down a hole. It's like, alright. She's looking down in the hole, and I'm like, huh, it would be kind of inconvenient if something would say come up behind her and tackle her into the hole, which the other troll then promptly does. And it's like, holy shit. So she goes down, and as she's under the water, she has a vision of Amberly, telling her that a new darkness is coming and to find Will. The fate of the world depends on it. Holy shit. So, of course, then we see in, like, the ruins of, like, San Francisco, got, like, rooftop communities and all this kind of, like, vegetation and everything. And Eritrea wakes up with Lyria there, and just, like, "Oh, welcome back." She's like, "How did I survive?" Don't know, man, but, when you found all you were saying was Amberly. And she, like, gets up. She's like, "I gotta talk to Cogline." And she's like, "Hold up. What's going on?" So, of course, Eritrea goes out, we see him, like, tinkering with a thing, and she's like, "Oh, you up to your old druid tricks?" He's like, "It's not magic, it's science." She's like, "I know, it's electricity." And, of course, he's like, huh, full of surprises, hugs her because he was worried about her. And they're like, "Okay, it's a miracle you didn't drown." And she's talking about, like, Amberly being brought up. He's like, "Listen, you were drowning, oxygen starved your brain, you were oxygen starved in your brain, so you're probably just seeing stuff." It's like, it was real. I mean, Will needs me. Now, if Will was trying to find you deep down, he'd be here. And it's like, trying to cast doubt on that. It's like, they would have looked for you. But I'm sure they're safe. Guess they're safe in Arbalon, because Eritrea doesn't know what's happening. So, of course, then we go to Will, and we see him training to be a healer, like he wanted to be in Season 1. And, of course, he's like going through all these places, and he looks at this woman, and they're kind of like chatting and everything, and she's saying that she had like burnt her hand in a fire and all that, and he's like, "Oh, okay, well, put this on 2 times a day and you'll be okay." And she like asks his name, and he's like, "I'm just a healer." And he walks off, and then we see that her hand magically kind of changes back to normal. It's like, huh, what's going on with her? So, of course, we see like the elvish people. We see like they're trying to deal with like everything after the attacks and all that from the demons. We see the king talking about how the treasury is empty. They don't have the resources or the manpower to like rebuild the villages and everything that were destroyed, and that, of course, the other races are having their councils to see if they'd help, but they'd rather see that the elves get screwed over first. So, of course, this one woman starts running up, calling for King Ander, says, you gotta see something, and we see these people were killed, and they had signs of magic user on them, and we see these symbols that are, like, carved into their foreheads. And he's like, okay, the Crimson did this, and evidently their influence is growing, and they are a group of anti-magic users who are led by General Riga. And they're like, listen, we just gotta take him out. It's like, you'd just be cutting off the head of the snake. Many people have, like, this feelings towards magic users, and, of course, he's like, listen, we can't do this. We can't, all he's doing is rewarding hate. We gotta stop this from going on. So, of course, then we go and we see this mountain. Like these mountainous areas. You see this group kind of like going towards this crazy structure, and it's like a demon-looking fortress in the shape of a demon. It's like, damn. Okay, so the doors open, and we see Bandon come in, and he was a gifted seer magic user who was corrupted by the Dagnamor at the end of Season 1. So he looks to have the Warlock Blade and is trying to do something. So, of course, he's talking to them, using the Warlock Lord's Blade, saying, if this call you guys answered together, take the first steps in resurrecting our master, you will be reborn as Mordrace. It's like, okay. So, of course, he then kind of like brings this one dude up. You're going to be the leader of the brothers, your brother, the Mark of the Snake, does this magic kind of thing on him, and he gets snake eyes and everything. Like, holy shit. So, of course, he's like going into Druid speak and kind of like talking about what's going on, how they're going to resurrect their master, and pretty much smite the non-believers and all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, that war and chaos will reign, and go for that. And while he's saying these words, he had opened up the altar and brought out a heart that he's pretty much bringing back to existence. And we learn that this is the Warlock Lord's heart. Shit, okay. And we see the symbol glowing on it, and then blood starts pumping out and gets on the altar. It's like, holy shit. So before anything else can occur, we see Al-Anon pop in, gets his sword at the ready, and of course, he's like, resurrecting this dude would be madness. He's like, well, sacrificing me to the Dagnamor was fucking stupid. And he's like, I regret what happened to you, but we were trying to stop the Dagnamor. And he's like, is that what you told Amberly when she sacrificed herself to become the Elcrease? And to strengthen the barrier to keep the demons at bay? It's like, ooh, shit. So, of course, they then start kind of like fighting each other, and he's like, he was talking about how he's manipulated by the Dagnamor to do this stuff, that the sword's controlling him, and he's like, you don't understand the power that this is going to give me, Druid. He's like, power is a curse for all those who seek it. And of course, they start fighting and everything. We see Al-Anon uses blue flame and all that, and it's a pretty good sword fight. It's a pretty good scene. Al-Anon gets kind of pushed off, and he does this cool-ass shockwave to knock everybody down, pretty much. And, of course, he keeps going in on Bandon, and he's like, you're gonna die forgotten and alone. He's like, that's not your burden to bear, that's mine. And then, of course, he kind of kicks him, and he's like, alright, guys, drink the blood, and they all drink it, and they transform into the Mordrace. And they got a freaky looking. These are like Ring Race, I believe, Lord of the Rings style. I don't mind them. They're kind of different than Ring Race, though. They're gigantic. I mean, they're still kind of hooded and everything, but they look much more demonic. They have actual faces to scare instead of just not seeing anything because of like the split of the dimensions in Tolkien's world. So it's like, holy shit, they powered up, and that pretty much gets an end to the fight because the leader, who's bigger and red and has the snake eyes and everything, blasts fire at Al-Anon and throws him out a window. It's like, shit. So, of course, then we see riders, and they get off their horses, and evidently this is General Riga, and he's asking about Will Ulmsford. And he asks these people if they've seen him, know anything about him, since he's a Shannara, and since he's the one responsible for unleashing the Dagnamor and the demon army, what these people believe, which is not true, because if they knew anything at all, the Elcrease was dying, and thereby the barrier between ours and the dimension that was holding the demons was weakening and allowed them to come through. But of course, that's inconvenient with this narrative that they want, and instead, he pretty much gets information that Flick Almsford, his uncle, lives in Shadyvale. So, of course, he's like, thank you. Rewards them with money, gives something to the little kid, and they go off to find the uncle. It's like, okay. So, of course, then we get back to the medical place. We see this scene where the gnomes are kind of doing this stuff about, like, elven anatomy. Will correctly talks about, like, what to do with the heart, and he was pretty much going to be given lead to do the surgery, but his hand was shaking, and, of course, the lead guy told him to just go outside. And it's like, okay. He's kind of, like, down about it. He's like, crap. He's like, I don't know what's going on. What do I do? And he's kind of angry. The woman who had the burned hand was watching him outside, who I don't believe was given a name, but Meredith, I believe, is her character name, because I don't remember them talking about her name throughout the rest of the episode. I was just like, okay, it's kind of going to be a little bit hard to call her just the woman when there's a couple other women that pop up, and it's like, that'd be kind of confusing. So, of course, we see Meredith watching him. We see the dude comes out, talks about how you're compassionate for your patients, you're dedicated to your studying, but this isn't what you should be doing. You saved the world, man. You could be doing greater things with your gift. And he's like, magic has a price that's too high. And he's like, wow, that's a pretty big thing to say. So, of course, he's like, listen, no matter how much we as healers can do, we can't save the world. You can. And he's like, I'm not interested in that. I just want to save the people I care about. So he's like, just give me one more chance, please. Like, I will. But that's it. And it wasn't Slander, the one gnome guy that was back in season 1, and what we saw talking with King Ander about the Crimson. It was Alanon that got him into this place. So, of course, we then go back to the fortress where we see Bandon with the sword, and he grabs it to activate his powers. And he has a vision of Will and the Skull Cup, and he's like, okay, the Skull of the Warlock Lord, the blade told me, who will know, find the Shannara, and the race, go and lead to find it. We see Alanon on the side of the mountain looking and seeing that the Mord race have left to do whatever, and they're like, oh crap. So then we get to Will in his room kind of pacing, and we see him get out the elf stones and use them. Now, what was interesting about this scene was that we see how he uses the stones and the magic kind of go up his veins and everything, and we see on his arm strange markings, almost like holes. Now, I don't know if they were like drugs or something, because it didn't seem to me in his character to be doing that, especially since he would be like working to be a healer, and then he would be it seemed that his energy was more focused on that. I don't know if these kind of holes or whatnot could be adverse effects for using the elf stones and using magic, and like weakening his body, or maybe his mind, because he uses them to pretty much get a vision of Amberly. So evidently he's just been using these to try and see her, and he's like, I've been lost without you. He tries to touch her, and of course it fades, and this of course makes him sad. And we've seen that since Amberly has turned into the new Elcrease, Will has not gotten over that fact. Now granted, she's technically, her physical form has changed, but Will can't be with her anymore, and that's profoundly affected him. Now, if he had probably been able to find Eritrea, that could have been different. He really needed a support system to try and get him through this, but evidently he didn't have that, and he still is having trouble dealing with that, the loss of Amberly. And I kind of like how they're doing that. I want to see kind of how they're able to bring him through that, because since we've changed networks from MTV to Spike TV, they are able to do some more stuff. The fight scene with the like troll definitely showed off more blood than I thought that they would do. Same with like the heart pumping out blood with the Warlock Lord. I'm like, okay, this is pretty good that it's in a later, well, about the same time slot on a different channel. So I'm kind of happy with what Spike's been doing so far. So I hope they kind of go with that. So of course we see Eritrea then practicing with their knives and everything, and Illyria just pretty much wants to talk to her about everything because they haven't like shared each other's past or whatnot, even though Eritrea has been there for pretty much a year. And she's like, all right, tell me about Amberly. And she's like, the bravest person I've ever met. And she's like, were you guys together? And she's like, not like that. And then, connection you can't explain. I'm like, what about Will? How does that fit? Because you sleep in your, when you sleep, you talk. And you talk in your sleep. So, she's like, he was the first person who looked at me and, like, saw me as more than just a rover. Like, saw something good in me. And she's like, well, do you still love him? And I was like, no, not anymore. And she's like, well, that's not kind of what I asked you. Because at first she kind of like waffles about the question, but she's like, no, I don't love him anymore. And I'm more in love with a person who's mysterious, talking about Lyria, and of course she caresses her face and then kisses her. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So we'll have to see what's going on with this relationship and kind of how it goes. So, of course, Lyria then talks about like how a week after you got here, Cogline called in the scouts to pretty much protect you. And they evidently had come back with something and said, all right, the Eritrea thing's gone. So I don't know what they got, but we're going to find out what it is tonight. So then we get to Will talking about, like, just reading and being in a bar and all that. And then we see that Marith pops up and pretty much at first tries to, like, kind of sweet talk him and, like, hey, wouldn't you think that the person who saved the world, people would be lining up to buy you drinks and all that kind of stuff? And, like, well, or, like, the bounty hunter would come to, get you because she shoved a card that was a similar card to what General Rigo has been throwing around. So he puts a knife on her, pretty much like, oh, she's like, oh, you're full of surprise. And you're like, not the first woman to try and take advantage of me, which is good that he has learned this fact because he did such stupid things. Eritrea tricked him a couple times last season, and I'm glad he's kind of learned to not take things at face value. At least be a little bit wary. Now, granted, he pretty much goes to end case scenario. This person is trying to kill me or something, and pretty much puts her in a position where he's like, listen, if I stab you at this point, you'll bleed out in less than a minute. It's like, well, okay, that's pretty cool. But there's like 2 real bounty hunters over there. And there was a third one waiting outside to get your ass, but that's why I got this card showing the blood on it. It's like, all right, so what do we do? Okay. You just pick me up and you're going to take me back to your place. So, of course, they try and, like, pass that off when the 2 bounty hunters pretty much try and come up and get him. And he's like, well, excuse me, I think I'm about to get lucky tonight. And he says, so are we. So then we start seeing a fight. Now, it looks like Will's a little bit rusty because he has a harder time in the fight than Merritt. Merritt still kind of has a hard time with the woman, but not really. She knows how to handle herself pretty well and is able to get the woman into like some positions and pretty much knock the shit out of her. Whereas Will really has a hard time because I don't think he had a little bit of combat experience in the first season, but he has not trained himself to where he really needs to be able to defend himself from hardened bounty hunters. And gets a gash and everything and is almost stabbed when Marith comes up and, of course, takes out the bounty hunter. So, of course, he's kind of screwed up, and, of course, they go back to his house, and she's like, I can't believe you didn't know that you were being hunted and everything. He's like, well, I just heard rumors of extremist elves. That's about it. After magic users. And it's like, where I'm at is a neutral zone. It's like, I'll tell that to the Crimson. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, listen, you kind of need help. Why don't I get a healer or whatnot? Yeah, the whole situation, I'd be kicked out of here. I'm okay. Pulls out the elf stones and heals himself. And, of course, she's like, how did this guy ever save the world? As he's, like, knocked out because of the energy it took to heal himself. Because magic has a price. So, of course, we get to Eritrea, and they're going in through Cogline's lab is like, listen, he's at dinner, it won't last long. And they get through it, and they find the pendant that Will had, and of course, Cogline shows up at that point. And she's like, why do you have Will's pendant? And he's like, listen, Larry, can you leave? I need to speak with her. And of course, they're talking about it, and he's like, listen, he's a Shannara. Came knocking, and I know I lied, I tried to protect you, and she's just like, I want the truth for once. And he's like, listen, I made a promise, and I wanted to keep it. I felt like I failed it, but then I had a chance to have it again. And he's like, please don't go. He's a Shannara. They only usually show up when people get hurt or dead. And of course, she's like, whatever. And of course, just kind of like leaves to discover what's going on. And then, of course, we see one of the Mord race flying around. We see Will waking up in the morning, healed and everything, and he hears a commotion, and the Crimson had attacked the Shady Vale because, of course, one of the gnomes was telling him about how the human village was attacked or setting up triage and everything. This guy Dax tells him about how his uncle, I don't know if he's okay or not, we told him to hide, and he's like, dang it. So Will's now in it too. Then we get Eritrea and Lyria leaving. And they're like, okay, we just gotta go through this. It's a long way to Arbalon. And then they get grabbed by some guys. It's like, oh crap. So of course we get this Wraith, the Mord Wraith, moving around and gets to Will in his home and says his lineage to Shannara a bit, and then blasts him out with a fireball. It's like, holy shit. So he's got his stones ready. He's about to go for it when we hear another Will. It's like, hey, I'm over here. And then runs off. It's like, what the hell? And then, of course, we get Mirth coming in and saying, that won't hold him for long, so we need to go. It's like, tell me what you want. He's like, the Druid, I need your help finding him. Why? Because he's my father. So, evidently, this is Al-Anon's daughter. It's like, holy shit. And it works out because she looks similar to Al-Anon, and granted, in her own way, is very similar in her dealings with people. So, I'm interested to see if this is true, or if there's more to this than we think. I really like how it's set up. All the kind of things converging. We see Bannon and him pretty much doing the whole darkness that Amberly is trying to avoid, because Warlock Lord, that's some bad stuff, sounds like, and pretty much comparable to the Dagger. Al-Anon is probably going to need some help stopping that. So, of course, that's where Will and Eritrea are coming in, since Amberly's pretty much trying to get them back together, because Eritrea has some power, I believe, that would be useful in this fight. And it's like, okay, adding in a daughter for Al-Anon, that's set up for an interesting season. So I'm interested to see what they're able to do with these episodes and how Spike handles it, because I didn't have a problem with MTV's handling of the Shannara Chronicles in the first season, but I'm interested to see if there's any noticeable changes, if they go darker, if they try and do different battle scenes, if they're like amped up, what they go for, and hopefully most of it improves the story. And from this first episode, I believe that they have retained the quality of the first season, and we're going to get some interesting stories for the second season. So, those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.